we've all seen your talks, or I hope everybody has seen your talks. But what I want to do is a very quick introduction. But in the context of your introduction, can you explain whether you're coming more from a startup greenfields environment or more from an established enterprise environment? So I'll start with yourself, Audrey, please.
So I'm Audrey Singh. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Clue. Clue is we've been around for 10 years. We've got about 12 million monthly active users. We're a B2C female health app based in Berlin. So it's not exactly greenfield. We've definitely got users that love our features or hate them. But yeah, it's not enterprise.
Great. And Jen.
Yeah, great. Hi, I'm Jen Dirth. I work in an enterprise. So Workday has over 12,000 employees, just reported $1 billion quarter, about 42 million active users. But within that, I work within Productivity Suite, which is kind of an entrepreneurship within larger Workday. So in an enterprise, but I would say we have more of a startup environment inside of the enterprise.
Great. And over to yourself, Pearl.
Hello, everyone. My name is Parul Goyal, and I head product for channel partners at PayPal. So similar to Jen, also an enterprise, a large company. Not only that, I also build products for enterprise, but I like to think that it is kind of a mini startup where we build our products from scratch and take them to market.
Great. And finally, Benoit.
Hey guys, I'm Benoit. I'm VP product at Deezer. So Deezer is worldwide music streaming service, and we have something like 14 million monthly active user. And so it's not a green field. It's more high velocity and high paced product.
Great, excellent. Thank you for introducing yourselves. So I'm going to jump right in. With an established product, we always hear about the MVP, build, measure, learn approach. But can you do that kind of an MVP approach when you already have an established product with established users who have expectations for how things are going to work? I'll start with yourself, Benoit.
Yeah, no, I do think that you can do MVP even if you have a established product and users. What strikes me the most with MVPs is finally at the end of the day, a lot of product managers actually don't really understand what an MVP is. And we have all our assumptions. So we want to put more features because we love our product. But I always say to them, okay, you want to add this feature, but are you sure that user want them? Why not? You don't deliver it and you wait for people to ask for this feature. If they don't, then the feature was useless. If they do, then you will be able to deliver it later and do some user satisfaction.
Great. Thank you. So I guess, you can use that kind of approach. Pearl, you just mentioned there that you're actually an enterprise delivering to enterprises. Do you still have that same kind of, do you have enough volume of customers to be asking the questions?
Yeah, so it's I agree with Benoit. Usually, if you have an established product, there are customer problems that drive innovation, right? That drive a change. In enterprise space, we have around more than 200 customers who have integrated with our product, which compared to a B2C product seems very small, right? But for a B2B product is substantial. So in this case, there are two things matter. One is how many of these customers are asking for the capability. And number two also is who are those customers? Because let's be honest, if it's a large strategic partner, them asking for something carries more weight, right? So those are the two things we take into account. But something else that's slightly different is we have to, if they are asking for something, ideally we would build it in such a way that it wouldn't require them to reintegrate. They wouldn't have to do anything to consume this new product. That's really the challenge in the B2B environment. How do you innovate without impacting the existing integration, without breaking the existing integration?
And how often are you successful? Because that is quite a difficult challenge. Like often companies and APIs, you do have breaking changes because what people are asking for. So how successful are you in trying the goal of not doing breaking changes?
It is tricky. I think it depends quite a bit on the nature of change, because with an API, you can add stuff without breaking previous integrations, right? But changing, existing capabilities, that's hard. So what that means is we do a lot of validation, a lot of vetting upfront before we roll out an API, because once it's out there, to some extent, it is set in stone. A few years ago, we upgraded our API from V1 to V2, and today we have customers still on V1, right? Because it's just so hard to get customers to move up, to upgrade to a new capability. And it makes sense, right? They have different priorities. So really my advice would be, if you have an API-based product, just make sure that that's the right product you want to roll out with, because making changes is very tricky.
Great. So I'm just going to touch on what you said there around kind of the upfront validation before you start making those changes. I might go to yourself, Audrey. How do you go about? Do you have any challenge? So I guess in the B2C world, is it different, or is it easier, more challenging than the B2B world to get that feedback and validation before you start building something?
I wouldn't say that it's easier or harder. It's probably just slightly different. I mean, our feedback comes from our users, usually in the form of either they write in through support or App Store reviews. We also do a lot of user research. And so, for instance, if we have a new product and we actually just shipped what the team will definitely call a minimum viable product or a minimum lovable product today around pregnancy, what we've done is actually gotten a lot of feedback leading up to this process from users in interviews, et cetera, before actually rolling it out as an experiment. And so I'd say that feedback comes in lots of forms. Either it can be qualitative or quantitative through surveys, or we look at literally how does the particular feature perform, or we hear about it in support messages or reviews.
And do you find it challenging getting that feedback? Do you get enough of it, or are your customers willing to share, or is it quite difficult? I guess maybe health could be a touchy subject.
Yeah, it's a very touchy subject. I think one of the things that Clue, we care a lot about is actually respecting the privacy of your users. I understand that this is some of your most personal content, that's personal data and personal content that we have. Surprisingly, though, our users are actually willing to share. They're willing to talk. Sometimes we even get a lot of health questions through support. We by no means give health advice, but it's our bodies. We do want to talk about it.
Great. And Jen, do you have? I guess it's the opposite. It's an enterprise environment.
Yeah.
It's not something, or am I wrong? Is it something that people want to talk to you about, or is it just something that they want to forget about and it's just in the background?
So for us, all of our new products, we actually run early adopter fast follower programs. And so we basically do a selection across Workday's 3,000 global customers, but we ask folks to apply. And then within that, we look for a diversity of, high volume, high transactions, geography, industry, size, just to make sure that we're getting a really good mix whenever we run these programs. Because obviously everything on Workday, if you think about it, there are really mission critical transactions happening, right? We don't want payroll to fall over if we're trying to build a new product that sends out emails. And so there's definitely a pretty rigorous fast follower early adopter program that really leads before we become generally available. And so whenever we select them, we also make it really very, very clear up front to say, like, we're expecting you all to run through these use cases, and we're expecting you to spend at least 4 hours a week, or a month. And then we basically do a lot of, I know I was listening to Jeff Patton's conversation right before this, but we do very, very, very similar practices where we always have engineers in the meetings and at least one in every feedback session. And we basically release, and then we ask them to hop on a call and do feedback with us. So.
And with that platform or that program, that sounds really interesting. Do you have to incentivize people? Are they jumping to join? How do you get people in?
Yeah, I think we're super lucky because we're talking to folks who they understand that what we're trying to do is make their lives better, right? And if for any reason, if we're trying to they want to have input and they want to have say in how the product gets developed. And so the incentive is are you going to make my life better? Are you going to save me time? Then yes, I want to like give you feedback. I want to have a voice at the table. So we usually have the opposite problem where it's hard to say no, to say, hey, we can't actually handle more than X number of customers, but we'll include you next time.
Great. No, it's a good problem to have. Benoit, your background, so you're currently with Deezer, but you have a large kind of B2B or a lot of B2B experience as well. Have you ever struggled with trying to get that feedback from customers?
Not really. To me, the main difference is when you work on B2B and especially in enterprise software, what I did, basically you can have 10 customers on the phone and you have your roadmap because you don't have that many customers and they are really vocal and they know what they want. So, I mean, you can do that and it's really straightforward product management. It's really interesting. What is more different with Deezer, and it's a bit like Audrey, you don't have trouble to get user feedback, but you can be overwhelmed by them. So I see a lot to my product managers, if you're not talking to one user per day, you're not doing your job well. But the issue with that is sometimes once the user have the direct line of a product manager, it can be really crazy because they want crazy feature and stuff like that. And to me, you sit with your customers in B2B and you have your roadmap done, and then you have a slow pace of execution. Usually when you do software, you have a 1 year roadmap, etc. When you're doing B2C, the main difference is like if one person or even 10% give you some feedback, you cannot make it a reality because probably it's only those 10% that want something out of 14 millions. So this is where user research help. I mean, you have insights when you talk with users as a product manager, and then you pair with user research to try to get the truth. And the truth is probably more something statistical. So, I mean, do we have a majority of users that will like this feature or not? And it really helps you find the truth wherever it's possible. I don't know if it is.
Yeah. So how do you, like, I guess that's a great point. As a startup, you're kind of almost just my first customer. I'm just going to really hone in on what they're asking for, or my first 5-10 customers, and really build a solution for them. But now when you're at scale, how do you avoid kind of going in 100 or 1,000 different directions because you have so many different users and so many different needs? I'll give that back to you, Benoit.
Actually, it's really important what you said, because I think a bit like Audrey, we have a lot of community and we have people that scream on the app stores and stuff like that. But you have to be careful to not listen only to vocal users. And we have really power users that are really demanding on our communities, for example, on Reddit, on Twitter. And you cannot always say yes, because those guys are power users and it won't make the difference. I mean, it's maybe 1 or 2% of your user base and you cannot do that. So I like to work on tools like priority metrics based on impact, and making sure that when we want to deliver something, it's going to fit the vast majority of our users, or at least it will have an impact on our numbers. So the new users or the intensity of usage or something like that. But we cannot just only say yes to the power users. Sometimes we do it because they are vocal, it can be a good publicity for us, but we are really careful with that.
Great. Actually, I'm going to ask Parul kind of the same thing there, because I guess it's at different ends of the scale there, kind of the 100 million plus 140 million, I can't remember the exact number, sorry, versus the 200 customers. So are you still very much in the listening to individual customers? And how do you, but it's still a challenge. You don't want to divide your product in lots of different ways. So how do you manage that?
Yeah, so Rory, that's definitely a challenge, especially in the, when your customers are large platforms like Facebook and Etsy and likes of them. Yeah, they usually do have custom needs. So what I have found through this journey is you have to have, and you build it over time, but you have to build an identity for your product. Who do you want to be? Do you want to be somebody who provides custom solutions, provides white glove solutions? Because then your product is going to look very different from, a product that has self-service onboarding, where, you have this set of capabilities and that's what you do. So I think this is something that we had to work on over time to realize that although we said we will do a self-service platform that anybody, a generic platform, over time, the reality of the segment we serve is that that's not going to be completely automated. We are always going to have large strategic partners that would require something custom, right? And for the sake of business enablement, we have to be open to that. We have to have some capacity reserved for opening those doors. But at the same time, we also need volume. So we do have two tracks. One is custom and one is self-service, where our smaller customers are able to utilize what we have by just taking care of themselves. But this is something that we have learned to do over time.
And how do you balance it? Like, is it just experience and judgment, or what do you use?
Yeah, so this is where what Benoit was saying, that it making it a very objective, data-driven decision, right? So, for example, the impact, obviously, the revenue impact that we will get from it, the severity, right? The long-term relationship with the partner. A lot of things go into deciding which bucket a partner or a customer would fall in.
Great. Audrey, you've got a kind of a large, you were saying you've got a large audience base, you've got a lot of vocal support. Is there any risk, or do you kind of look at who's not your customer or who customers you're losing? Because there could be a risk that if you're just listening to your customers, are you limiting your marketplace?
Well, I think this is about, and both Benoit and Parul talked about this, it's like what goal are we focused on? And right now we are focused on subscription revenue. And so when we look at the prioritization of potential features, like do we do this or this? And obviously we all have limited resources. What we actually specifically looked at was what were unsubscribers saying, because we wanted to specifically look at their needs. And the reason that we actually launched Pregnancy today was because that was one of the most common reasons for why people were unsubscribing from our premium features. They were potentially using Clue to conceive, and then they got pregnant, and then it was like, well, now what? So this was really viewed as a retention feature amongst a couple of other things that helped us determine to focus on that. It wasn't actually just user impact, I'll bring up here. It was also like, hey, what's the proper sequencing? Were there dependencies on other features or other technical dependencies? Or do we have something like, let's say, tech debt that might prevent us from launching this as quickly? And so we were looking at a basket of things, but fundamentally focused on how do we best grow revenue by delivering things that subscribers actually want.
Oh, it's a great example. Actually, the offboarding, stop them, figure out why people are offboarding and solve for that. It's a great example. I'm going to just touch on, because I mentioned it at the start, the customer's expectations. So Jen, I'll give this one to you. It's around, so with a product like Workday, people are expecting stability. They don't want to log in every day and see things are different and changed, and oh, they're running another experiment and it will be rolled back tomorrow. So how do you manage those kind of customer expectations and still enable you to do the experimentation that you need?
That's a great one, Rory. Yeah, I think that for us, our products are actually I think that there are, when I first started at Workday, I was pretty surprised, because Workday releases biannually. And again, to your point, there's like over 40 product areas, so people don't want to be surprised. They actually asked at Workday to start releasing less frequently. However, our organization actually, within productivity tools, there's also productivity suite. So our tools actually still release every week. And we're able to do that because our products are like, we're very, very close to our user base. It is actually less, we're able to segment. And I think the idea behind there is people who are opting in to think through and use our productivity tools. They sort of they already in their mental model, and because of how things have been marketed and designed and positioned, they understand that these are the tools that you sort of use as a augmentation and something that gives you superpowers when it comes to using normal Workday. And so these are productivity tools that are that sit on top of the rest of Workday.
Okay, great. Does anybody else have a way that they manage that conflict that they want to share? Any experience? The fact that your customers might not be so willing in certain environments to do those experiments and see things change. Or Parul from oh, sorry, Benoit, go ahead.
No, but just in B2C, it's something that is pretty usual. So two things. First of all, you try to do experiments mostly on new users, so they don't really understand what's going on with your product. And sometimes you do it with your actually regular product, but in this case, indeed, you involve your power users and you want them that it's kind of a reward, you know, they are testing a new feature. It's kind of a reward because they are really faithful to us, and you can do it that way. It's a bit harsh to manage if the experiment doesn't work, and so you have to decommission your experiment, but it's part of the game. And I think for power users of digital products, especially in subscription model, people are kind of used to it.
Great. I'm going to come back to kind of the core premise here, the enterprise versus startups. So in startups, there's the kind of move fast, break things, just get it working. The runway is short. You need it to kind of get there before you run out of funding. In enterprise, it's kind of the stereotypical bureaucracy. So how do you kind of try to overcome those challenges with bureaucracy so that you can kind of keep the pace of change and innovation still strong? So I'll start with Benoit.
I mean, by nature, these are digital products, so we are going pretty fast, and we have bureaucracy, but it's not our issue. I did a lot of enterprise software though, and where bureaucracy was more complex, especially because you have a lot of contractual obligation, and your customers don't want to see features go, and you have to maintain, you know, a lot of version of your product. It's much more complicated. One tip that I did in the past is to put customer around the table and making sure that actually they talk with each other. And so when you know they all want something, you try to have this minimum that can make everyone happy around the table so they can have it faster. So basically you start a meeting with various customers and you say, okay, I want to develop this feature. What do you want? And they will all say, I want feature A, feature B, feature C. And you say, if you want all of that, you will have everything in 1 or 2 years. So do you want to sit down and find the MVP or minimum lovable product for this feature? And then they start talking. And if you can promise something in 3 to 6 months, then they agree. So you can you know, fight bureaucracy or this kind of thing with pairing with your customers with just a single, you know, the voice of truth actually about delivery and how complex it is.
That's a great example of, I haven't actually thought about it from the customer side of things, but it makes a lot of sense. Is there anybody, maybe Parul or Jen in the bigger, so Jen, from an organizational perspective, is there bureaucracy within the organization that you need to jump through?
Yeah, I actually watched Henrik's talk yesterday, and I thought when he said 1 + 1 + 1 = 10, it actually is really true, right? So sometimes we think of large enterprises as slow moving, and bureaucracy almost even has like a negative connotation to it. But I think the real power, like every I think feature has like a positive and a negative, right? And even though bureaucracy sounds like a negative, the positive is you have leveraged impact. And I think what you can take from the startup world and apply it into enterprise is that it's still, you're still making those connections. So instead of a startup going out and saying like, who do I want to partner with? What market should I enter into? It's in our enterprise, you kind of are looking internally. You're kind of saying like, oh, which app team should I be partnering with? You still have to think of it. System thinking still applies, you know, still thinking through which connections should I be making, but you're kind of networking internally as opposed to externally. And so I would say that, yeah, just keeping in mind that, you know, being an enterprise has its positives as well.
Yeah, so, and if I can add to that, to what Jen is saying, right, we are a payments company. So if we roll out a change, it is super important that it works. It's, you know, it's compliant. So I think this is where bureaucracy actually helps us. You know, it helps us make sure that we are on the right path. And there are ways to cut out the unnecessary bureaucracy, right? By empowering the teams, by making it about the customer, by making sure the leadership is aligned before you go into more detailed discussions. So those are skills we have honed over time. But I do agree that given in payments, I do feel like there are a lot of upsides of having this large workforce behind you to support you.
I actually love this like reframing of bureaucracy. It's not something that's bad. I mean, I admit being at a startup, it's like fun. We get to like, move fast and break things. I would actually say that there's definitely a downside to moving too fast and breaking things because it can feel like whiplash. And you may not, with an MVP, you may not invest long enough to actually see, oh, is this really going to work or not? Because it was so minimal that you might just ship it and then like go on to something else. And bureaucracy, or at least like either leveraged resources or more feedback or more focus and more commitment to something can actually help really refine a product through its process.
Great. And where do you, because you said at the start that you're past the startup phase, but you're not an enterprise, you're kind of in the middle. What is the culture like in Clue? How would you describe it?
So, I mean, I think we're definitely a startup. We're just not like struggling for product market fit. So depending on your definition, we're definitely still a startup. We're about 70 people. And, if I were to describe the culture, I think the thing that like just stands out is that people are just truly passionate about our purpose, which is to make female health more accessible and clear, and supporting women and people with cycles to make the decisions in health that they need to make. And so everybody is just very focused on that mission and that purpose, and that really makes this culture unique. But it also means that there's lots of passionate ideas and passionate thoughts and wanting to go in a lot of different directions. So bringing that all together is definitely one of the challenges, but also, one of the joys, I'd say.
Great. I think we're just about out of time, but I'm going to ask everybody here. This is the last few minutes of UXDX 2020. 2020 has been a weird year. Not going to lie, it's a bit strange. We're all not sitting together like I would have hoped that we could have. But do you have a message that you just want to leave with positively and inspiring to finish off the day? So I'll just go across my screen. So Audrey, you're the first one.
I don't know, lean into those challenges, lean into the weirdness of 2020. We had to do a lot of things differently and we've learned a lot from it. So silver lining is it forced us to do stuff differently, and that was probably a good thing.
Great. Jen?
Yeah, I'd say I have 3 thoughts around what to be optimistic about. The first is really around innovation. So I feel like there's been a lot of really interesting things popping up. I don't know if you all have heard of Lunch Club AI, but this idea of using machine learning to pair people to have coffee. And so as a result of these constraints, I feel like I've seen a lot of innovation. The second thing is just how companies are responding. I think that there's been an outpouring, and I love I think it was like the first panel that happened that kicked off UXDX, where you see these leaders of large corporations like LinkedIn and Shopify just saying like how they're supporting their employees and their people. And it's really just really powerful to see that like people are, that corporations really have the stewardship and they're really thinking about social responsibility differently. And the third one is just the shift in how we work. I think that I have 2 young kids at home and we're able to like cram things in, and the fact that like people are opening their eyes on how work can still be done and very productive, even if it's a little bit different than traditional ways. So the shift is getting us to think more creatively, more broadly about what can be possible. So those are 3 points.
Excellent. Thanks. Parul?
Yeah, so I have 2 kind of similar to Jen. One is innovation, because it's usually constraints that force us to think differently. I'm specifically looking for innovation in travel, right? Because that's an industry that's been severely impacted by pandemic. And I'm sure there's going to be a big comeback and it's going to look very different. So that's something I'm looking forward to. And something else that pandemic showed us was we can work from anywhere, right? We don't really have to be in office. And, as a product manager, I always assumed I have to be in the office. And now I feel like, oh, I could live in Bali and still be a product manager. So that's what I'm looking forward to in future, living in Bali and still being a product manager.
Excellent. Yeah, I'd love to join you there.
Thank you.
Bit more heat than we're currently getting. Winter is definitely approaching.
Let's do UXDX in Bali next year.
Well, as you say, we are doing UXDX APAC in March. But Benoit, what message do you have?
Yeah, I think it's going to sound pretty much the same. I think we all need to embrace the challenges that we face, at least in two areas from my perspective, from a business standpoint or startup standpoint. There is so much new opportunities that open. I mean, the digital is booming, the online retail is booming. So you can now sell pretty much everything and provide any kind of services. The companies need online services, new online services every day to boost collaboration. So it's just in terms of business in the digital world, it's just, I don't know if a gold mine is the right word, but it's still good opportunities. And from a personal standpoint, I mean, you can imagine new way to work to be much more efficient. Look at how many meetings we're doing by Zoom, and because we have the Zoom fatigue, I think a lot of us just realize that meetings are actually like a vampire and suck your blood, and actually you need to work better, work more in an asynchronous way, and at the end of the day, work won't be the same after, and I hope for good.
Excellent. So yeah, I just thought that would be a nice way to end UXDX 2020, a bit of positivity focusing out there. From my personal perspective, I've said it earlier on when I was talking to Jeff Gotthelf, my daughter was born in April, and had I been going out to work every day, I would have just left in the morning, come back in the evening and not seen her. And I've really enjoyed watching her kind of discover new things as she's growing. So that's my positivity for 2020. So thank you to everybody. Thank you, Audrey, Jen, Pearl, and Benoit. Really appreciated your insights. And we'll just hand back now to John, who's going to wrap up the day, and then I'll do a closing.